You're listening to The Bird Bath. Welcome back to The Bird Bath. Each week we scrape the surface of the news you need to know, so let's get into it. Top story this week is one that is breaking as you're listening to this. Ellie Diagnostics has confirmed what many people have been murmuring about for the past few days. The company has sold its operations to IDEXX Laboratories. The Dallas diagnostic firm, launched in 2018, grew very quickly to over 300 clients and had a really solid reputation for customer service, price competitiveness, and a big thing was the lack of long-term contracts. In a letter to clients from the interim CEO, Thomas Vandervoort, dated September 8th, Ellie reassured customers there would be, quote, no immediate action required and that services would continue through November. Now, November's not very far away, and it's something that we dug a little bit deeper into this. Sources that we were able to get a hold of at multiple impacted companies tell us that the reality is a little bit more stark. From what we understand, IDEXX is planning to shutter Ellie's operations just like it did following its 2019 acquisition of Marshfield Veterinary Labs. Back then, IDEXX eventually closed Marshfield's Wisconsin facilities and then folded the client base into their massive lab network. Leadership from Ellie has already been shuffled, with Brooke Herbst out as CEO, replaced by the managing partner from the investment firm Avigo, Thomas Vandervoort. It's a pretty big shift here. If you look at the sort of life of a lot of the people at the team, this was something that they were looking to right the ship and try to get things on track. But ultimately, IDEXX came and gobbled up this competitor. Now, what this means for people, we've seen this a lot. We saw this a lot as well, not only in the diagnostic lab side of things, where we've seen Antech and Heska join up, and Zoetis would bring in ZN Labs, and like we said, Marshfield being acquired by IDEXX, and the continued consolidation of not just veterinary practices, but the businesses outside of it. Also, we've seen it with distributors. But these smaller regional labs can really carve out a really loyal following. And not to say Ellie was small and regional, they had a growing national footprint. But the difficult thing is surviving with the heavy investment in the tech and the infrastructure. It's really difficult to compete against the massive scale that IDEXX can garner with their huge business. For practices that look to Ellie as an alternative to one of the big lab players, their options have again narrowed, and unfortunately it seems like they're going to find themselves back under IDEXX's umbrella. While Ellie's leadership framed this as a thoughtful and deliberate assessment, the industry could take this very simply. IDEXX has eliminated another competitor. If closures follow, customers will face with the same playbook that Marshfield's clients did, absorbed into IDEXX's system, whether that was what they planned to or not. Independent practices and consolidators like today's news, big reminder that no matter what you're doing, if you want to see the growth of new models and new structures, you have to participate with your dollars. If you want to see companies like Ellie with their high-end client services and their no contract models continue to grow, we are the ones that have to pull out our dollars and support these businesses in continuing to grow. A business that sees nothing but growth coming is CoVet. CoVet has secured their growth funding with Off Leash Capital to build what they're calling the future of veterinary AI. CoVet has been growing steadily month over month across the United States, Canada, and even quite a bit internationally, and they've just closed their growth round with Off Leash Capital. One of the reasons why this is pretty notable is the fact that Off Leash Capital is one of the few funds dedicated solely to the veterinary industry. Their bet really is a big piece to be able to say that this is the AI tool to jump behind when you're looking at it. Off Leash Capital co-founder Gina Del Vecchio said, "Excellence in execution, customer experience, and forward-thinking strategy has put CoVet on a trajectory that will influence veterinary medicine and operations for years to come." CoVet prides themselves on having 80% of their 60-plus employees coming from clinical backgrounds. And that means that what they see is sort of a hands-on understanding of what life is like in practice. CoVet co-founder, CEO, CTO Yannick Bloom said, "This is genuinely transformative. We're building an entirely new category for veterinary teams, a true AI co-pilot designed to integrate seamlessly into clinics and give time back to the people who need it most." The funding is said to be going towards global expansion and deeper product development. Financial terms were not disclosed. One more story for the big guys. National Veterinary Associations continues their team building around what we all can only imagine is a massively impending IPO. NVA announced that its board of directors has appointed John G. Bruno as CEO effective immediately. Bruno most recently served as president and COO at Xerox beginning in 2022, where he saw all commercial business segments and led strategic acquisitions of IT Savvy and Lexmark. Before Xerox, he held dual roles as CEO of Data Analytics Services and COO of Aeon PLC. Earlier in his career, Bruno was managing director at Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs. He's been a board member of Global Payments, a massive multinational financial technology company, since 2014. So obviously a really big animal guy. But it makes a lot of sense here. He's got a ton of experience with publicly traded and large and growing companies. And that's where NVA is taking themselves. They're setting up their team to be ready to be a publicly traded business. We've seen additional people added to the board over the last couple of months. And now with the CEO at the helm, I think it's only time before we hear about that IPO announcement. For our friends in the Great White North, the College of Veterinarians of British Columbia has narrowly escaped what the regulators said was insolvency by 2026. They increased their annual fees and it barely passed, 55 to 44. The college had warned members that without new revenue, operations would cease within 18 months. They hadn't updated their annual fees since 2011, and they had actually done multiple votes on this, 2012, 2019, and 2023, all with things that did not pass. The British Columbia SPCA supported the change, calling the regulators essential for animal welfare and public trust. And the Society of BC Veterinarians also urged people to vote yes, but stressed that the total governance needs massive reforms. The really big reason, and if you're not Canadian, which I'm not, but I know a lot of our listeners are, so you can skip ahead 20 seconds. But for those of you that aren't Canadian, the big difference here is that the College of Veterinarians of British Columbia are actually the regulatory body that handles all of the different licensing and things in the Canadian provinces. Each province has their own self-governing College of Veterinarians. They handle enforcing standards, managing discipline, and all of the license things that in the US, we rely on veterinary medical boards and state veterinary medical boards to be able to license and handle all of those things. So when you see an increase in these prices, it's directly shouldered by the veterinarians in Canada. So as costs rise, more of this is laid right on the shoulders of the veterinarians. It's, as you look at the financials, that it buys time, but the college still claims to have massive financial issues. They're going to be able to close the difficult margin around right now, but they still said that they're having difficulty controlling their financials. So this story could be a quick band-aid of something that we see come in the next year again. Now, finally, a story that might not be directly in your veterinary clinics or in our veterinary industry, but coming out of Argentina, a really interesting story around CRISPR and how that's affecting the art of breeding horses. You might be familiar with CRISPR, which is a DNA gene editing tool. And there's a collection of horses down in Argentina that are clones of the prize-winning steed Polo Pureza, but they have a tweak to their myostatin, which is a gene involved in regulating muscle development. They edited this with the intention to allow them to increase and quicken their pace. CRISPR was used in fetal fibroblasts to generate embryos through cloning, and then the embryos were implanted into mares. There's 5 of these CRISPR-edited horses that were born 10 months ago, and it's been really interesting, but the thing that's wild is that the Argentinian Polo Association has banned the utilization of CRISPR in official matches. The Argentine Polo Association has now banned the use of gene-edited horses in the sport, following the lead of some other organizations, such as the International Federation for Equestrian Sports, which banned the practice all the way back in 2019. It's kind of an interesting story as you talk, especially when people think about breeding and what goes on there. One of the scientists, Molly McHugh, a veterinary clinician scientist at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, said horse riders often feel very strongly about breeding as an art and not a science, but really it is both together. It's pretty neat to think about. There's a great article from Nature that dives into the utilization of CRISPR across lots of different livestock and how it can increase yield from different animals, how it can increase the drought resistance, how it can allow people to create animals that are going to have the traits that we're looking for in them, whether it's in sport, whether it's livestock, whether it's feed animals, or whether it's for other breeding things. But there always comes the other side of that coin. So there's ethical concerns around CRISPR. Dr. McHugh again said, are there unknown consequences with the changes that they're making that are going to appear over time? Some people worry there's side effects that include mutation in off-targeted genes, which could lead to health issues and premature deaths. So not exactly a story that's happening directly in your clinic, but something that's really interesting to look at and think about how we may begin to see CRISPR gene-edited pets in our clinics. To me, it's not something absolutely outrageous. We've been seeing people breeding in and out special traits that they wanted to see in these animals, and now we're utilizing more directed science into this. So interesting topics, something definitely to think deeper about, especially with innovation on the mind following VIS last week. For more on these and other stories, join us by subscribing to our Substack. There's a link in the bio, and don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing and rating the show. For the Bird Bath, I'm Ryan Leach. See you next week.